Hello everyone, just hopping on tonight to talk a little bit about infant feeding, which is a topic that's about to become very relevant to me, being 34, almost 34 weeks pregnant over here. But infant feeding has actually been an area that I've always been very interested in and passionate about, and I've done some additional education in my field to, I guess, feel more comfortable on how to advise mothers in this area. So I thought with this kind of baby boom that's going on in the area that I live, at least a couple moms out there might get some use out of this information. But basically, I kind of put together a little handout that talks about a cue-based feeding approach, specifically looking at your baby's stress cues when you are feeding them. And why do we care to be interpreting your baby's stress cues throughout the feeding? Well, I would say that it's not always about the quantity of food consumed, but about the quality, because this is what impacts the baby's long-term feeding success. And when I say long-term feeding success, I mean even into toddlerhood and beyond. How do they respond to having food put in their mouth as they continue to grow? And that all starts now when they're infants. So, like I said, the handout kind of talks about specific stress cues that your baby may demonstrate while feeding. And again, we want to pay attention to these stress cues in the short term to prevent aspiration from occurring, especially in those infants that are high risk to aspirate. So premature infants that have an underlying heart condition or respiratory illness or condition. A lot of times babies will aspirate silently, so being in tune with their stress cues is very important for babies within that population. Now, for your typically developing infant, this is also important because we need to make sure that the baby is not developing negative responses to feeding or developing feeding aversions. If you're wanting to breastfeed your baby, typically if you are able to interpret their stress cues and respond appropriately, you will have a longer breastfeeding experience with your infant, less likely to give up, because it is hard. This stuff is even harder to manage when you are trying to breastfeed. So there's just a little less control over the whole situation. So that's kind of in the short term. Like I said, in the long term, we want to pay attention to the quality of the feeding and how you're responding to your infant's cues, because it can definitely lead to maladaptive feeding behaviors or defensive oral behaviors that can persist into toddlerhood and beyond. Sometimes babies that struggled with breastfeeding because of a slew of things can then be more sensitive when they are toddlers trying new foods, different textures. All of those things can kind of come about down the road, basically. The other thing, when you are feeding your infant, this is your first chance to kind of communicate back and forth with your infant. So when you are in tune to their cues, when they do something that indicates they are under stress while feeding, and you respond appropriately to help them, after they show you that cue, you are teaching them the back and forth of communication right there. And there are many studies that show that parents that are more responsive to their babies while feeding then end up being able to better promote their speech and language as they get older and are talking. And so, like I said, it's kind of it has a short-term effect and a long-term effect on the baby. Even babies that are, gestationally, term babies, developmentally normal otherwise, these strategies are still important for those babies. So, like I said, the handout gives a breakdown of specific stress cues and then also what to do when your baby is showing this possible sign of stress. I tried to put it in layman's terms, but if some of the terminology is not making sense, feel free to comment or message me if you need further clarification on what I mean under the kind of intervention side of things and trying different strategies. But I hope that this information is helpful to some of you moms out there. And again, this is an area that I do provide speech therapy services for. So, if you give some of these things a try and it's not helping or you're just not sure if you're doing it right, this is something that, like I said, I can provide therapy for, and definitely something that could be done remotely during these times of social distancing. If there are any, like I said, if you have any other questions, shoot me a message. I plan to post some more information about infant feeding in the future, so if you haven't already, go to my page, Winkler Words and Herds LLC on Facebook, and you can like it and stay up to date with any other information I have coming out about infant feeding. Thanks.